Um, so yeah, thanks for joining us. But one of the big kind of catalysts of this conversation is a lot of our enterprise level customers are coming back to us with a lot more interest in the security products now that we have a lot more of this dashboarding tools. I think that the problems they're running into now around the permissions modeling and how people can dismiss things, who can do that, how you can specify that, clamp it down, and so forth. So they're looking for some more of that. And I know you guys are working on that, so or getting close to shipping that out. So I thought it'd be a good time for us to connect and get a good understanding for that, and go back to the CS team and articulate what's happening over there.
For sure, yeah, and happy to demo it. It's I think it's pretty. It should be pretty straightforward, which ideally is the way that our features work. So
absolutely.
Should I just jump right in, or
yeah, sure. Go ahead and jump right into that, and then unless Adrian, you had anything you want to start out with, otherwise we can jump into your.
No. I mean, my sort of motivation for joining is.
Did we lose him?
A good opportunity to understand, what's coming in new release.
Cool. All right. Let me pop over then. So for the quick demo, I'm just going to go through the basic steps here, which will be adding the approval rule. So just like any other approval rule, and there's an indicator within the UI that this is a special approval rule, that we have these new settings. And from there, we'll go through 4 major flows. Open an MR with no report, so no vulnerabilities at all. Opening an MR with an empty report. So this is when we're actually generating a security report, but there are no vulnerabilities. And that's actually 2 separate flows there. And then a report with a low severity vulnerability, and then a high severity vulnerability. So these are the basic results here being approval required when there's no report, because if there's no report, we should care. Empty report, no approval. Low severity, no approval. And high severity also requires approval.
Got it.
Cool.
And when you say, just real quick, and you're probably, I guess I'll see this with the demo, but when you're talking about approvals, is it the approvals still on the merge request itself rather than on the actual items in the security report? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So I just made this quick project for demoing this. All it really is a really simple README file. And then to speed along the process, I created this kind of cheat CI script. And what this does is
file. Yeah.
Yep. It just looks for this file. So what we're going to do in our MRs is we're just going to build the file ourselves.
Sure.
Just copy some JSON over. So first up, we've got let's go ahead and create a new file. Oh, actually, sorry. I already forgot my first step, which is we need to make the rule. So let's go make the rule first.
And will this be project level right now, or can it be at the group level as well?
It can only be project right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there are any approval rules on group currently.
Right. Okay.
So for merge request rule, this UI, there's some wonkiness to this right now, but what we do is we add an approver here, and this should really be called like add approval rules, not add an approver. So what we're doing is we're adding a rule. And then here I'll say, this is an actual approver to the rule.
And this could be groups though, right? Like
yes.
I could add a group to that, like security group or yeah.
Oh, well, this is on staging, so I'm not really sure what groups exist. There we go.
Yeah. Sure.
So we'll just go ahead and add both of those there. And then the way this currently works is it pattern matches against a very precise approver name. So we have docs on this, but I will just add this right here. In the future, we'll be able to just select this from a dropdown, similar to like templating for CI templates. This has to be greater than 1 for approvals to make sense. And then we add that rule there. Now, the way that you can tell this is a different one, let's just add a quick one. We'll say QA. I don't know if you have a staging account. I'll just add myself again. Or sure, whoever Hercules is. Cool. So as you can see here, this indicator says vulnerability check requires one or more merge request approvals only if high or critical severity vulnerabilities are detected. So this is
those are predefined, the vulnerability check and QA, those are hard-coded values, are they? That
yes.
Just a moment to equal, okay.
And is that adjustable to say, I want to have approvals for low severity as well?
Not yet.
Okay. And that name that you gave, there was nothing behind that name that pulled in a special template, right? Because you're talking about the drop down. I wasn't sure if you were doing like a specific name there
this has to be named vulnerability check.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, so we specifically pattern match against this approval name.
Yep, that's what I was trying to make sure I understood. Got it.
But on the back end of this, there is actually, this is handled properly in the back end where we actually have a state model for like approval rules. And so this is called a general approval rule. And then this is called a report approval rule.
Okay.
So we built this model to support other kinds, and currently license check is doing a similar thing. So the idea is for blacklisted and whitelisted licenses, it will use the same data model, but like a different name here. So that's how it's modeled on the back end. And in the future, we'll be able to expand that to other kinds, including like code quality as well, and things like that.
Is the idea in the future from a UI standpoint to separate those out so that we can see the difference between the general rules and the ones that are for reports?
Yes. Currently, it's just this minimal one here, and it was more getting something minimal into customers' hands so we can actually see if this makes sense or if this direction is even the right way to go. In the future, I think that we would either have a drop down here or possibly like a state drop down, so you can say like regular rule or like report approver rule. Yep. So when I say that, I say report approver. That is a generic model for an approval rule that depends on the content of a report, like a CI report.
And the reports, do they have to be reports that are formatted reports that come back to the merge request? So it has to be in that syntax, the correct formatting?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It couldn't. I guess what I'm saying is it couldn't be any tool that you put in your CI pipeline that generates an artifact that's a JSON report, right?
Currently it depends on.
It has to match the right parsing of that template to get back to the merge request. I think that's the way that works, from my understanding.
It depends on all the supported report types here, of like the like report TM report.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we're just going to make like a really quick version of this GL SAST report. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back here. We now have since we now have the rule defined, let's just create one that has the initial state will be no report generated, because currently that will try to update the report, but because there isn't one there, the job will still pass, but it'll fail to upload one. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so the way the state works is that when you open a merge request, it copies over the project rules to the merge request. And this essentially works this way because you should be able to modify the rules within the context of the merge request, depending on your permission settings, without modifying the project rules. So we submit the merge request.
More granular level of picking that. So you would inherit those rules if you did nothing here, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so here we go right here. And this actually got missed in the initial work, but there should be a hover tooltip right here as well to indicate this. But as you can see, this got copied over. The default state is requiring that approval. And when this pipeline finishes, it should stay the same, because if there's no security report, we still require approval. So there's two hook points. One is when it's called, I think the service is called like refresh merge request. And that fires when you open a merge request or when you push any code. And that always resyncs the rules. So it resets this number to whatever the setting is in the project.
Yep.
And then after the pipeline runs, it optionally can decrement this to 0.
If it comes back as a clean report, that would
That's
be
right.
the match there. Only match, or is it also if it comes back with low severity as well?
It's a medium, low, or none.
Got it.
Cool. And we finished, and let's just refresh this to show that staging is not super fast today, it appears, but that's okay. Yep, requires approval still. Cool. So there's our requires approval case. Let's go ahead and make an empty report now. I'm just going to copy this from a similar one I made over here. So I don't have to remember how to write JSON correctly. We're going to go new file. And so in this case, we have an empty array here of vulnerabilities. And I'm not going to bother waiting for this to finish first. I'm just going to submit it, and then we can start making the other one so we can start running this along. And we need to copy over another one of these to get an accurate vulnerability. Cool. Okay, so in this case, the report has one vulnerability. It's a SAS vulnerability, predictable pseudo-random number generator. And this is the key line here, severity high. Okay, so while this one runs, and our expected result for this one will be nothing changes, right? So the approval is required by default, and that won't change because there is a high severity vulnerability involved. Now the special case is the one that we just opened before this with an empty report. And as you can see here, no approvals are necessary for this one.
Nice.
So what happens, and I just opened an issue about this because I think it's going to be really important, is we need to start adding some system notes or audit trail events here to actually record that increment and decrementing. So it becomes a bit more intuitive to customers because right now
you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know it changed unless you went in there and looked, right? Yeah.
Right. And having that tooltip right here will help. But as you can see, this is now optional.
Right.
So
it might even be worth having it say something there that says optional because there's nothing that's reported over medium, right? Just so that people know why.
And part of the reason that we didn't explore that too deeply when we initially built this is because it gets really noisy really quick because you have the reset and the decrement, reset, decrement with every code change. So you eventually just fill up the log there. So we've been looking at strategies on how to like reduce that noise.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I want to demo just one change here with this one. What I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to push up a change to this branch that is just like a a text change. But what's going to happen is when I push up the code, this is going to become required again and then re-decrement.
Uh-huh.
And that just demonstrates that flow real quick. Does this all make sense so far?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So Brian asked earlier, could you configure the approval rules at the group level? You said no. Is that in plan, do you know, or?
I don't think we have an issue for that, and we should. But the thing is that it's not so much. This is built entirely off approval rules as that feature exists currently. So approval rules themselves don't work at group level. So that'll need to be implemented before we can actually get report approvals. And there may be an issue for that. I'm not sure. Okay. So this code changed. Refreshing here. Requires approval. And then as soon as this pipeline finishes, it should re-decrement down to 0. And this is, I say down to 0 because if this number right here was 3, it would still reset to 0 and then back to 3.
Right. Cool. Yeah, this makes sense. I appreciate running through that. I think this will be good to get in front of people and see how how people interact with it and what the response to it is. I think that one thing I see coming up still in conversations is when a vulnerability comes back reported, a developer could still approve that or dismiss that vulnerability. Which, if someone came in to just do a review, they may see that that's been dismissed and say, oh, that's been dismissed. So then I know I'm good here. I can approve this without necessarily knowing that the right person had done that approval. Right. So I think that's something that I see coming up still because it's kind of similar in line with what's coming up now. Although this can definitely help for that.
And one thing that so this is a parent issue, and I linked to this on the top here. One thing we've been trying to do more and more in development is we do this thing called a development log. And so I include this portion here, and this includes both the status of the issue as it was being developed, because this one took quite a few changes to make, and then decision points. And decision points here is where you can track the discussion on specifically this dismissing feedback will not be disabled when security approvals are enabled, because there's kind of a lot of edge cases to still consider. And if you click this here, you can see where we actually made that decision and why we made that decision. So This might provide some feedback on where we kind of went there.
Yeah, totally. That's helpful.
So in this case, we kind of had to decide the full scope of disablement. We don't really have that granular permissions right now. And it becomes a bit tricky. And so that one, we definitely need to discuss that more, but it's a complicated question. Specifically, like the feedback mechanism that you disable or dismiss, it's not very granular. So like we would have to figure out which method of interacting with vulnerabilities to allow or disallow, if that makes sense. Like creating as a follow-up or dismissing.
Right, yeah. Yep, that makes sense.
Which I guess would be here. So we can just try that real quick and see what happens.
One thought that I had that, is similar to how this is implemented in some ways is that when you have a security group or an approver for those reports, that person is the only person who could be also dismissing those vulnerabilities, right? In those cases, in that would make logical sense, because you would think if that person was there to approve that those are okay, they would have to go through that list anyway. So that would make sense. They would be the ones doing the dismissing because they would be the approvers.
That makes sense. But it's still protected in this case, as you can see here. Like I've dismissed this one, but because it's still a vulnerability present in the report, it still requires approval.
Yeah. It's more. I was just more thinking around like that. They may have not known who that was that dismissed that. It's more of like these big
Right.
organizations have some of those problems of just scale of number of developers, and they just need more levels of protection around that stuff. So it's not so much that, I know it's still protected there. Just they might be kind of tricked into thinking that it's good to go since it was dismissed.
Right. Yeah, and I think that we definitely need to improve the auditing in general on these. Like, it's going to be really important for that, and that's something that we're working on with the first class vulnerabilities as well.
Great.
Cool. All right. So yeah,
that answered all my questions. So that's great. So this is getting into this month's release on the 22nd?
Yes, it's actually already on .com behind a feature flag, and I just pushed the final MR to remove the feature flag.
Great.
So it should go to self-hosted on the 22nd, but you can use it on GitLab.com today.
Oh, perfect. That's awesome. Adrian, did you want to talk about your questions here while we have a little bit of time?
Yeah. I mean, thanks, Luke. That was really useful.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, this last question, which I just dropped in there, say totally unrelated, but it's something that's come up in a couple of conversations, with prospects or customers, and it's basically saying, fine, you do your commit, you merge, you run your pipeline, you do the security analysis there, but how do we know that, we've got a baseline on which we're, making those checks. So I didn't know whether there's anything. Obviously, we can run pipelines, we can schedule pipelines on every project, but whether there was any way with things like SAST of us being able to do a more global scan of the entire instance or whatever it may be to.
So I kind of wonder why you would need that if you were using Git flow and you have the feature branch model and your master is a protected branch that you do your deployments from. Any merge that gets into that master branch is going to kick, that commit is going to kick off the pipeline. So you always have a snapshot of current state in the master.
Yeah, but where they've come from is say, okay, today a new vulnerability is found, and tomorrow anybody who sort of introduces that vulnerability, it's going to get trapped.
Gotcha. So the stuff that's out there already, kind of having a remediation model for identifying those vulnerabilities that are in production since that last release.
Right. So part of that is anytime you run a pipeline on master, it's running it against everything that's currently there. There's obviously an issue if it's like within the Git history over time. And this is This is a ticket that we have in 12.4 for triggering a secret detection on the full history of the repo. So this is currently in development, and there's a bit of UI here around how we want to handle that. It's basically we need some kind of interface for users to kick off that scan. Nice. But this is a similar topic we're talking about. So I'll just link that in here.
Okay.
Does that answer your question on like kind of direction?
Well, I think it looks like it answers that specifically in terms of secret detection. So, is there sort of similar intent on
I think
other areas?
Yeah, in your case, Adrian, the dependency scanning piece is kind of unique in that they could find out about a vulnerability in the public, and that you're using that particular version in production. You haven't run a scan since then, right? Because
that's right. Yeah.
So that is a unique use case that I would like to see. Because I know one thing, and Lucas, I don't know where this is at, but I know that we're working towards. Similar to how GitHub has that thing where it says, hey, you have an out of date or a security vulnerability in your dependency, you should update it, or was going to maybe create a merge request for you or something along those lines. I kind of wonder if maybe there would be something similar that we could do for dependency scanning of, we know in master that this dependency is in there, and this is a known vulnerability now. Create a merge request or fire off a pipe, something like that to detect if it's in there and give you some indication on when to fix it or how to fix it.
Well, it's currently limited to yarn dependencies, but we do have auto remediation. And I don't know if either of you have seen this feature, but through the auto remediation feature, let me see here. This is available through either the merge request, or you could do this through the security dashboard.
Yeah, this is what I
So
was talking about. Yep, exactly. I didn't know this was in. Oh, so it's specific to Yarn. Are we doing other ones as well, like npm and Composer or whatever other languages are we trying to get to parity with?
I don't believe in theory, yes. I don't believe that increasing the scope of auto remediation is on like the current priorities. Is the current priority, and I will find this. How? All right. Maybe this was in a demo. We have a security. Do you remember that there's a demo group that we actually use occasionally? So maybe this is on production instead.
Oh, on GitLab.com?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me see.
Demos. This might be
it.
Oh, it's so much faster than staging. This is great. I think it's this one.
Okay, it's different.
You should be a button that allows you to create a merge request, right?
Yeah, there should be, unless it's already been created.
Oh, that's why. Yeah, the button's not there. Then
It should be linked somehow. This is weird. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for this.
no problem.
Yeah, sorry.
We dragged you into some more other stuff.
Yeah, took you off topic. Welcome to the life of an essay.
That's right.
Being taken off topic.
If you give us the time, we'll take it.
I just think this feature is super cool, so I want to show it.
Yeah, totally. While you're kind of looking around for that, one thing I'm curious if this has been brought up in discussion was when you have a vulnerability that needs to be addressed, having that vulnerability basically block the merge of that merge request. I know that, having approvals, of course, is kind of a roundabout way of doing that. But one thought was that, we have the resolve discussions where you have to resolve all the discussions before you can do that. I felt like it could kind of fall in line with that and be, a discussion topic that has to be resolved before, as another check for that. And it would also allow you to have better linkability between, if you were to create that issue, there could be a note that links back into the comments of that where it's coming from, and that would be the discussion point. If that makes sense.
So
just a thought.
Yeah. So first class. So we're currently working on this in this release, engineering discovery for first class vulnerabilities, and this is it's an important issue because we're primarily talking about introducing like a new. What we currently see in the UI as vulnerabilities they're basically occurrences. They're occurrences, or the term we've been using is findings, really. And we need to come up with a new way of interacting with vulnerabilities, more similar to making them kind of an issuable object. So the idea is like you can add labels to vulnerabilities, you can have discussions about vulnerabilities, you can close them with a commit, things like that. And that's the idea with this feature.
Great, I like that. That would be in line with kind of how I was thinking about that too. Yeah,
and so nice. Andy just posted a gigantic comment on this 15 minutes ago, so perfect timing. But yeah, so the idea is a finding, you promote it to a vulnerability. A vulnerability is then something, and this happens through like a triaging process. So we'll do like a triage list. Once it's promoted to a vulnerability, you can attach multiple findings to a single vulnerability, such as occurrences, and then you can create issues throughout the vulnerability to resolve it. It's actually very similar to something like an epic model there. So we have findings, multiple findings, and related issues, and that way you can actually attach an SLA to that as well. Follow remediation through like a timeline.
Oh, cool. That's great.
And I'll link this one too. Yeah, this is one that we're really excited about getting to. So we're just wrapping up date discovery on it, and we should start implementation on that next release. And it could result in quite a few changes of flows and the way that vulnerabilities are handled right now. But this is going to be really critical. It also allows us to do things like allow external sources. So we knew like HackerOne reports coming in, and you can convert those into vulnerabilities through external sources as well.
Yep. That makes sense. That probably would be also another entry point for external, external analyzer tools that people bring into their pipelines, maybe being able to import those in as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, that was really helpful. Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate that. If there's any, if you guys ever need any feedback or anything like that around, going through this flow or, customer thoughts on this, feel free to pull me in and, or something, I'll find some of the team too to help with that. We're happy to help with these things and looking forward to all these changes.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, I'll let you guys go. Feel free to send follow-up questions.
Appreciate it.
Bye.